The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of New Carolina City. The year was 2387, and this frontier world had seen better days. Maya Washington stepped off the transport shuttle and looked around at the run-down buildings and cracked sidewalks. She wore a simple blue dress that came down to her knees, hiding the metal and circuits that had replaced her left leg 3 years ago. Maya had come to New Carolina to check on the veteran housing projects, but she wanted to see things as they really were. That meant no uniform, no escort, and no advance warning to local officials. She needed to walk among the people and hear their real stories, not the polished reports that crossed her desk back at headquarters. The war with the Centauri Empire had ended 2 years ago, but its effects still showed everywhere. Damaged ships sat in the spaceport, waiting for parts that might never come. Veterans with missing arms and scarred faces stood in line at the job center, hoping someone would hire them despite their injuries. The lucky ones had found work in the factories or farms. The rest struggled to survive on small government payments. Maya walked slowly down Main Street, her prosthetic leg making each step a careful calculation. The doctors had done good work, but the replacement would never feel like her real leg. She had learned to hide the slight limp, but walking on uneven ground still required extra attention. 2 men in security uniforms watched her from across the street. Sergeant Carl Bradley was a big man with small eyes and hands that looked like they enjoyed hurting people. Officer Pete Murphy was younger and thinner, but his face held the same mean expression. Both men wore the blue and gray uniforms of New Carolina Colonial Security. "Look at that one," Bradley said to his partner, "walking around like she owns the place." Murphy squinted at Maya. "Never seen her before. Probably another one of those military types coming here to cause trouble." "Yeah, they think they're so special because they fought in some war." Bradley spat on the ground. "This is our world. They need to learn some respect." The 2 officers crossed the street and began following Maya. She noticed them in the reflection of a shop window but kept walking. She had dealt with hostile civilians before. Most were just scared people who had never left their home world. They saw veterans as reminders of how dangerous the galaxy really was. Maya stopped at a small cafe and ordered coffee. The owner, an elderly woman named Helen, served her with shaking hands. "You're new here," Helen said quietly. "Just visiting," Maya replied. "How's business?" Helen glanced toward the window where Bradley and Murphy now stood watching. "Could be better. A lot of people are struggling since the factory closed." "What happened to the factory?" "Owner said he couldn't afford to hire veterans. Too much insurance cost, he claimed. Easier to use automated systems." Helen's voice carried years of frustration. Half the men and women in this town bled for humanity, and now they can't even get jobs. Maya nodded and left a generous tip. As she walked back onto the street, Bradley and Murphy approached her directly. "Excuse me, miss," Bradley said with fake politeness. "We need to see some identification." Maya reached into her small purse and pulled out her civilian ID card. "Here you go, officers." Bradley barely looked at it before handing it back. "This doesn't look right to me. Pete, what do you think?" Murphy pretended to study the card carefully. "Definitely suspicious. Could be forged." "I assure you it's genuine," Maya said calmly. "Is there a problem?" "The problem is we don't like strangers coming here and stirring up trouble." Bradley stepped closer, especially military types who think they're better than everyone else. "I'm not in the military," Maya lied smoothly. She was technically on leave, which made it true enough. "Right," Murphy laughed. "And I'm the Emperor of Mars. We can spot you soldier types from a mile away. All that fake dignity and honor nonsense." A small crowd began to gather on the sidewalk. Most were veterans or their families, and Maya could see the anger building in their faces. She raised her hand slightly, a gesture that any military person would recognize as a command to stay back. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Maya said. "I'm just here visiting friends." "Sure you are." Bradley grabbed her arm roughly. "And I bet you're carrying weapons too. Pete, call for backup while I search this troublemaker." "That won't be necessary." Maya tried to pull away, but Bradley's grip tightened. "Oh, but it is necessary." Bradley's voice turned ugly. "We've had enough problems with you military freeloaders coming here and thinking you can do whatever you want. Time for a lesson in respect." Murphy had moved behind Maya, blocking any escape route. The crowd on the sidewalk grew larger, but no one dared intervene with colonial security. These men had power here and everyone knew it. "Now let's see what you're hiding under that pretty dress," Bradley said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Lift it up so we can check for weapons." Maya's jaw tightened. "Officer, I don't think—" "I didn't ask what you think," Bradley interrupted. "I gave you an order. Lift the dress or we'll do it for you." The crowd fell silent. Even on this rough, frontier world, what Bradley was suggesting crossed every line of decency, but Maya knew that resistance would only make things worse for everyone watching. With quiet dignity that made the watching veterans straighten their shoulders, Maya slowly lifted the hem of her dress. The advanced prosthetic leg was revealed, its metal surface gleaming in the afternoon sun. Scars from the surgery marked her thigh where flesh met machine. Bradley and Murphy burst into cruel laughter. "Well, well," Bradley said loudly. "Look what we got here. A crippled soldier girl. Who thinks she's tough? Bet she lost that leg running away from the enemy," Murphy added, drawing more laughter from his partner. Maya lowered her dress and looked at both men with eyes that had seen alien worlds burn and human fleets die in the cold of space. She said nothing, but something in her expression made Bradley step back slightly. The crowd dispersed slowly, shame and anger written on every face. Maya walked away without another word, but everyone who witnessed the incident knew they had seen something that would not be forgotten or forgiven. What none of them knew was that Maya Washington carried more than just the scars of war. She carried a name that commanded respect across human space, and her humiliation would soon reach ears that could shake worlds. Maya walked 3 blocks before she found a quiet alley where she could stop and breathe. Her hands shook slightly as she pulled out her communication device. She had faced alien warriors who stood 10 feet tall and had claws like swords, but the casual cruelty of those 2 officers had cut deeper than any weapon. She looked at the device for a long moment, then put it away without making any calls. This was her fight to finish, at least for now. Across town, a young man named Danny Kim had been recording the entire incident with his personal camera. Danny worked at the local news station and had been walking to lunch when he saw the crowd gathering. Something about the woman's calm dignity during the humiliation made him keep filming even after the officers left. Danny uploaded the video to the Colonial Network within an hour. He added a simple caption: "Colonial security officers abuse disabled, veteran on Main Street." The footage was clear and the audio picked up every cruel word. The video spread through New Carolina's network like fire through dry grass. By evening, it had reached the military communications channels that connected all human colonies. Veterans across the sector began sharing it with their friends and former unit members. Maya spent the rest of the day visiting veteran neighborhoods and listening to stories that made her heart heavy. In the Riverside district, she met Tony Rodriguez, who had lost both arms fighting off Centauri boarding parties. He couldn't find work because employers said his prosthetic arms made other workers nervous. "They look at us like we're broken," Tony told Maya as they sat on his small apartment's front steps. "Like we chose to get hurt instead of dying for their freedom." In the West Side housing complex, Maya talked with Linda Thompson, whose husband had been killed at the Battle of Proxima Station. Linda worked 3 jobs to support her 2 children, but the colonial government had cut veteran widow benefits twice in the past year. "They say there's no money for us," Linda said with tired eyes, "but somehow there's always money for new offices for the colonial administrators." Maya documented everything in her mental notes. Her official report would paint a clear picture, but she suspected her mother would want to see this place for herself. Meanwhile, the video of Maya's humiliation reached Earth's Colonial Defense headquarters. Colonel Jake Bennett was working late in his office when the communication came through. He had served under General Patricia Washington for 8 years and had never seen her lose her temper. She was known throughout human space as the Iron Lady, the woman who had never lost a battle against alien invaders. Bennett watched the video twice before walking to the general's office. He found her reviewing tactical reports from the outer colonies. her silver hair pulled back in the tight bun she had worn for 30 years of military service. "General, there's something you need to see," Bennett said quietly. Patricia Washington looked up from her reports. At 62, she still moved with the precise efficiency that had made her legendary. Her dark eyes held the same intensity that had stared down alien fleet commanders across conference tables. Bennett played the video on the wall screen. The general watched without expression as her daughter was forced to expose her prosthetic leg, while two officers mocked her disability. When the video ended, the silence in the room felt dangerous. "Where did this happen?" the general asked in a voice that could freeze helium. "New Carolina Colony, Sector 7. The incident occurred this morning, local time." The general stood and walked to the window that looked out over the training grounds where young soldiers learned to fight humanity's enemies. "Get me Governor Hayes on the communication channel, now." Bennett had never moved faster in his life. Within minutes, he had established a connection to New Carolina's colonial government. Governor Richard Hayes appeared on the screen, his round face already sweating despite the cool temperature in his office. "General Washington, what an unexpected pleasure," Hayes said with false cheer. "To what do I owe the honor?" "Cut the nonsense, Hayes." The general's voice was arctic cold. "I've seen the video of what your security people did to my daughter today." The color drained from Hayes's face. "Your daughter? I had no idea. If I had known—" "If you had known, you would have covered it up better," the general interrupted. "Instead of addressing the real problem, which is how your people treat the men and women who bled for human survival." Hayes stammered for several seconds before finding his voice. "General, I assure you this was an isolated incident. I'll have those officers disciplined immediately." "You'll do more than that," the general said. "I'm coming to New Carolina personally to review your colonial security procedures. And Hayes, I won't be coming alone." The communication ended abruptly, leaving Hayes staring at a blank screen. Back on New Carolina, Maya had returned to her hotel room and was writing her preliminary report when her communication device buzzed. Her mother's face appeared on the small screen, and Maya felt a mix of relief and concern. "Are you hurt?" was the first thing General Washington asked. "No, Mother, just angry." "Good. Anger can be useful if you control it properly." The general's expression softened slightly. "I saw the video. I'm sorry you had to endure that." "It's not about me," Maya said firmly. "It's about every veteran on this world who faces that kind of treatment every day. Those officers were showing off their power, but the real problem is systemic." General Washington nodded with approval. Her daughter had inherited more than just military skills. "Keep gathering your evidence. I'll be there in 72 hours with enough firepower to get everyone's attention." As news of the video spread through military channels, veterans across human space began to take notice. On distant worlds and space stations, men and women who had fought impossible battles for humanity's survival saw one of their own humiliated by the very people they had protected. The storm was gathering, and New Carolina had no idea what was coming. 3 days after the incident, the morning sky above New Carolina filled with ships. What Governor Hayes had expected to be a single diplomatic vessel turned into a full battle group. The massive carrier Humanity's Shield dominated the view, flanked by 6 destroyers and 2 heavy cruisers. Every person on the planet could see them hanging in orbit like angry metal clouds. Maya stood on the balcony of her hotel room and watched the ships arrive. She knew her mother never did anything halfway, but this display of force would send shockwaves through the colonial government. Good. Maybe now they would understand that their actions had consequences. At the Colonial Security Headquarters, Sergeant Bradley and Officer Murphy sat in their break room watching the news coverage. The reporter was explaining that General Patricia Washington herself was aboard the flagship, coming to investigate colonial security procedures. "This is your fault," Murphy said to Bradley. "You had to go and mess with some random woman." Bradley slammed his coffee cup down. "How was I supposed to know she was somebody important? She looked like just another broken-down soldier." Captain Leon Foster burst into the room, his face red with anger and fear. Foster was a political appointee who had never served in the military, but he had powerful friends in the colonial government. Those friends were now demanding answers he couldn't give. "You two idiots have destroyed everything," Foster shouted. "Do you have any idea who General Washington is? She's the woman who held off 3 Centauri battle fleets at the siege of Kepler Station. She's never lost a battle in 30 years of service." "So what?" Bradley tried to sound tough, but his voice shook slightly. "This is civilian territory. Military types can't just come here and push us around." Foster stared at him in disbelief. "That woman you humiliated is her daughter, you moron. A decorated lieutenant colonel who lost her leg fighting aliens while you were sitting here safe on this backwater world." The color drained from Murphy's face. "What are we going to do?" "We're going to let you face the consequences of your actions," Foster said coldly. "The governor has already thrown you both under the transport shuttle. You're on your own." Word of General Washington's arrival spread through the veteran communities like electricity. Men and women who had been hiding in shadows suddenly found their courage. They began gathering in the town square, not to protest or riot, but simply to show that they existed and remembered what honor meant. Tony Rodriguez was there with his prosthetic arms gleaming in the sunlight. Linda Thompson came with her 2 children, carrying a picture of her dead husband in his dress uniform. Dozens of others joined them, each carrying their own stories of sacrifice and neglect. Maya walked among them, no longer hiding her identity. She wore her dress uniform now, the silver oak leaves of a lieutenant colonel bright on her shoulders. The Purple Heart and combat action ribbons on her chest told their own story of courage under fire. "They can't ignore us anymore," Tony said to Maya as they watched more veterans arrive. "Your mother's coming has given us something we lost, hope." The Colonial Administration building buzzed with panic. Governor Hayes had called 3 emergency meetings in 2 hours, each one more desperate than the last. His advisors offered the same useless suggestions: blame the officers, claim ignorance, promise reforms that everyone knew would never happen. "Sir, we need to consider that General Washington might have legal authority here," his chief of staff warned. "Any active military personnel on colonial worlds fall under military jurisdiction for certain crimes." Hayes wiped sweat from his forehead. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying those officers might face military justice instead of colonial courts. And military justice doesn't care about local politics or connections." At the spaceport, the first shuttle from the fleet touched down with mechanical precision. General Washington emerged wearing her full dress uniform, 4 silver stars gleaming on each shoulder. Her aide, Colonel Bennett, followed, along with a squad of military police who moved with the controlled efficiency of professional soldiers. The general's reputation preceded her like a shockwave. She had earned her first star defending the Mars colonies from Zephyrian raiders. Her second came after breaking the Centauri blockade at Alpha Centauri. The third was awarded for her brilliant tactical victory at the Battle of Wolf 359, where she turned certain defeat into crushing victory. The 4th star came after she personally led the assault that ended the Centauri War. But her greatest achievement wasn't military. General Washington had never lost a soldier to preventable causes. She investigated every training accident, every equipment failure, every case of neglect that cost human lives. Her troops knew she would move heaven and earth to protect them, even after they left active service. Maya met her mother at the spaceport. The reunion was brief but warm. 2 professional soldiers who happened to share blood. General Washington examined her daughter's face and saw the controlled anger that had been building for 3 days. "How bad is it here?" the general asked, as they walked toward the waiting transport. "Worse than the report suggested," Maya replied. "The discrimination is systematic. Veterans can't get jobs, housing, or basic respect. What happened to me was just them showing off." The general nodded, grimly. "Then we'll fix it. All of it." Their convoy drove through streets lined with veterans and their families. These people had fought humanity's enemies across the galaxy, losing limbs and friends in battles that kept human civilization alive. Now they stood in quiet dignity, watching their champion arrive. Bradley and Murphy, meanwhile, had barricaded themselves in the security building, hoping their union representatives could protect them. They were about to learn that some mistakes couldn't be fixed by lawyers or politics. The storm had arrived, and New Carolina would never be the same. The main square of New Carolina City had never seen anything like it. 5,000 veterans and their families gathered as General Patricia Washington stepped onto the makeshift platform. The crowd fell silent as she approached the microphone, her 4 stars catching the afternoon sunlight. Maya stood beside her mother, proud in her dress uniform. The contrast was clear to everyone watching. Here was a woman who had sacrificed her leg defending humanity, standing next to the legendary general who had never asked her soldiers to face dangers she wouldn't face herself. People of New Carolina, General Washington began, her voice carrying across the square without electronic amplification. I came here because my daughter was humiliated by your colonial security forces. But what I found was much worse than one incident of cruelty. The crowd listened with the attention that only soldiers knew how to give. These were people who understood the weight of words spoken by someone who had earned the right to speak them. I found a world where the men and women who bled for human survival are treated like unwanted garbage, where veterans who lost limbs, fighting alien invaders can't find work because their sacrifices make civilians uncomfortable, where widows of fallen heroes struggle to feed their children because colonial administrators consider them too expensive to support. Governor Hayes watched the speech from his office window, his hands shaking as he held a glass of whiskey. His political career was over, but that was the least of his problems now. The general's investigation had already uncovered evidence of corruption and fraud in veteran services. Colonial auditors would be arriving within days. In the security building, Sergeant Bradley and Officer Murphy sat in a holding cell. The military police had arrested them 2 hours earlier on charges of assault on a superior officer, conduct unbecoming, and violation of civil rights. Their union lawyer had taken one look at the charges and quietly left the building. Captain, Foster paced his office like a trapped animal. The colonial government had already fired him and frozen his pension-pending investigation. Worse, the military prosecutors were reviewing his entire record of veteran affairs. Every denied claim, every delayed payment, every casual cruelty would be examined under military law. General Washington continued her speech, her voice growing stronger with every word. Some of you fought at Kepler Station where we held the line against 3 enemy fleets with ships held together by courage and spare parts. Others bled at Proxima, where human Marines proved that alien warriors could be beaten in hand-to-hand combat. Still others served in the deep patrols, spending months in the dark between stars to keep our trade routes safe. The crowd began to straighten, old pride stirring in hearts that had been beaten down by years of civilian contempt. These people had done impossible things when humanity needed them most. They deserved better than the treatment they had received. You came home to a civilization that owes its existence to your sacrifice, the general said, her voice now carrying across the entire city through broadcast speakers. Instead of gratitude, you found closed doors and cruel jokes about your injuries. Instead of the support you earned, you found administrators who saw you as budget problems to be solved. Maya stepped forward to the microphone. Her voice was quieter than her mother's, but it carried its own power. 3 days ago, 2 officers forced me to expose my prosthetic leg in front of a crowd. They mocked my disability and called me a crippled soldier girl. They thought they were humiliating just another broken veteran. The crowd growled with anger, but Maya raised her hand for silence. They were wrong. I'm not broken. None of us are broken. We are human beings who answered the call when our species needed defenders. We paid prices that civilians can't imagine, and we did it willingly. Across the city, regular citizens watched the broadcast on their screens. Many felt shame as they heard stories of how veterans had been treated. Others began to understand for the first time what these quiet, scarred people in their neighborhoods had actually done for humanity. Helen, the cafe owner who had served Maya coffee, wiped tears from her eyes as she watched. Her own son had died at the Battle of Titan, and she had seen how the colonial government treated Gold Star families. The general's words gave voice to grief she had carried in silence for years. General Washington took the microphone back. Change begins today. I am placing this colony under temporary military oversight pending a full investigation of veteran services. Every case of discrimination will be reviewed. Every denied benefit will be reconsidered. Every act of cruelty will face consequences. The crowd erupted in cheers, but the general wasn't finished. More importantly, I am establishing a new position. Colonel Maya Washington will serve as Director of Veteran Integration for the entire frontier region. Her office will have the authority to investigate complaints, review policies, and ensure that the people who defended humanity receive the respect and support they have earned. Maya felt the weight of the new responsibility settle on her shoulders. It was a bigger job than she had expected, but one that needed doing. Too many veterans across human space faced the same problems that existed on New Carolina. In his cell, Bradley stared at the wall and wondered how everything had gone so wrong. A simple traffic stop had turned into the end of his career, and possibly his freedom. Murphy sat on his bunk, finally understanding that actions had consequences even for people who thought they were untouchable. The speech ended with General Washington reading the names of New Carolina veterans who had died in service. Each name was followed by a moment of silence, and by the end, there wasn't a dry eye in the square. As the crowd dispersed, veterans walked with straighter backs and higher heads. Their champion had come, and she had reminded everyone what human courage really meant. The galaxy was a dangerous place, but humanity had people willing to stand guard in the darkness. Change was coming to New Carolina, and it would spread from there across the stars. 6 months later, Maya stood in the same spot where Bradley and Murphy had humiliated her. The street looked completely different now. A beautiful memorial had been built there, made of black stone with golden letters listing the names of every veteran who had died defending human space. Fresh flowers covered the base, placed there by school children who visited every week. The military tribunal had been swift and thorough. Bradley received 10 years of hard labor on a mining colony where his cruelty would be remembered by the prisoners he would work alongside. Murphy got 8 years, his lighter sentence reflecting his status as a follower rather than a leader. Captain Foster faced 20 years for systematic fraud and abuse of veteran benefits. Governor Hayes had resigned in disgrace and fled to a distant colony where his reputation hadn't followed him yet. The new governor, Maria Santos, was a former Marine colonel who understood what real leadership meant. Her first act had been to double funding for veteran services and establish strict penalties for discrimination. Maya now wore the silver eagles of a full colonel on her shoulders. Her new office oversaw veteran affairs for 12 colonies, and she had a staff of 40 investigators who took their jobs seriously. Every week brought new reports of improvements across the frontier. Veterans were finding jobs, receiving proper medical care, and most importantly, getting the respect they had always deserved. The changes went deeper than policy and law. Something fundamental had shifted in how human society viewed its defenders. The video of Maya's humiliation had spread across all of human space, sparking conversations that had been avoided for too long. People began to understand that freedom wasn't free, and that the price had been paid by specific individuals who deserved more than casual neglect. Tony Rodriguez now managed a factory that specifically hired disabled veterans. His prosthetic arms had become symbols of capability rather than limitation. He employed over 200 former soldiers, giving them good wages and the dignity of meaningful work. The factory produced medical equipment used throughout human space. Linda Thompson had remarried a fellow veteran and opened a school for military children. Her program helped kids deal with the unique challenges of having parents who had seen combat. The colonial government funded the school fully, recognizing that supporting military families strengthened human civilization. Helen still ran her cafe, but now it served as an unofficial meeting place for veterans and their families. She had hung pictures of local heroes on the walls, including one of her son who died at Titan. The cafe had become a place where stories were shared and memories honored. Maya walked through the memorial garden, reading names she had come to know through her work. Each name represented not just a life lost, but a family changed forever, and a sacrifice that had kept humanity safe. Her own name would never be on this wall, but she carried the responsibility of speaking for those who couldn't speak for themselves. A group of school children approached with their teacher, Mrs. Kim. They came here every Friday to learn about the people who had protected their world. The children were young enough that the Centauri War was just history to them, but they were learning to understand what that history meant. Colonel Washington, 8-year-old Amy Chen, called out, "Will you tell us about the brave soldiers again?" Maya smiled and knelt down to the children's level. Her prosthetic leg no longer bothered her. If anything, it had become a source of strength, proof that broken things could be repaired and made strong again. "What would you like to know?" Maya asked. "Why did they fight the aliens?" asked Bobby Martinez, whose grandfather had served on the frontier patrol. "Because sometimes bad people try to hurt good people," Maya explained in simple terms. "The aliens wanted to take our homes and hurt our families, so brave men and women went into space to stop them. Some of those brave people got hurt, and some never came home, but they kept fighting because they loved you and wanted you to be safe." "Like my daddy?" asked Sarah Kim. Her father had lost an eye at the Battle of Wolf 359, but now taught defensive tactics at the military academy. "Exactly like your daddy," Maya said. "He and all the other veterans are heroes because they chose to protect people they had never met. They fought for children who weren't even born yet because they believed the future was worth protecting." "And do." Elderly man approached the group. Maya recognized him immediately as Commander Jack Wilson, retired, who had served as her mother's tactical officer during the Centauri War. He walked with a cane now, but his back was still straight and his eyes still sharp. "Colonel Washington," he said with the respect that military people always showed each other, "I wanted to thank you for what you've done here. This place is finally starting to feel like home." "We all did it together, Commander," Maya replied. "The fight isn't over, but we're winning." As the children continued asking questions and placing flowers on the memorial, Maya thought about how far they had all come. The humiliation she had suffered on this very spot had sparked changes that reached across human space. Veterans were no longer invisible or forgotten. Their sacrifices were remembered and honored. The galaxy was still a dangerous place. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled the borders, and human soldiers stood ready to defend civilization. When they came home, they would find a society that valued their service and supported their transition to civilian life. Maya looked up at the sky where the stars were beginning to show in the growing darkness. Each point of light represented worlds where humans lived and worked and raised their children in safety. That safety came at a price, paid by people who understood that some things were worth fighting for. The memorial ceremony ended as families began heading home for dinner. Maya remained for a few more minutes, reading the names one more time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new veterans who needed help. But tonight she could stand in this place of honor and know that humanity remembered its heroes. The future was bright, because people were willing to fight for it.